According to the Bureau of Statistics, in the 2 years between July 2022 and June 2024, Australia took in 1.4 million migrants from overseas. That's 5% of the total Australian population. It's almost double the Aboriginal population of Australia. Let that sink in. In the same 2-year period, 440,000 people left. That means the net increase in population from migration was about 1 million. That's a new Canberra, Hobart and Darwin. Did you notice 3 new big cities popping up in our country? Me neither. When you put this kind of demand on a housing market and you don't keep up supply, guess what happens to prices? They go up. It's not politics, it's simply economic law. So why do we let so many people in? Well, for many reasons. Political analysts say it helps the left side of politics, the Labor side, because new immigrants tend to vote Labor. Some say business benefits because it provides cheaper labour and we need both skilled and unskilled workers. If you take a purely economic perspective, it's to keep our economy growing, or more specifically, to keep our gross domestic product number, our GDP, growing. Our GDP went backwards a bit in 2020. The impact of what we now know was COVID mismanagement. But it started to pick up again in 2021 and then considerably in 2022 and 2023 when the floodgates to new immigrants were opened. And so we avoided a recession. Or did we? If we look at the GDP per person instead of the GDP overall, if you're cheating and making your economy grow just by increasing your population, then the only way to tell if it's truly growing is to look at the GDP per head, or GDP per capita, as they say, right? The definition of a recession that economists use is if an economy has 2 consecutive quarters, 3-month periods, of negative GDP growth, so 6 months of negative GDP growth, then you are technically, according to economists, in a recession. So let's look at the last 9 quarters of data, going all the way back to March 2023, right up to the latest data from March 2025. There's the quarters listed on the left side of the screen. In the first column of data there in the middle, we've got the overall GDP growth indicated. Okay. But take a look at the last column on the right. That's the GDP per capita. And look, it's been negative for 8 of the past 9 quarters. The only quarter that was positive was December last year, the second last line there on your screen right now. Then it was right back into the negative in the first quarter of this year. Gee, reckon we might be in a recession much? The definition of a recession that economists use is if an economy has 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, and we've had 8 out of the past 9. So even with these unsustainably high levels of immigration, we have very limited economic benefit in real terms. My special guest on the show this week is fellow Aussie independent news commentator and documentary filmmaker TOPHER FIELD from the Oddcast podcast. Topher, welcome back to The Other Side. Good to have you on again, mate.
Well, thank you so much, Damian. I often get invited to go to the same place twice. You had me on last week, but normally when they invite me back the second time, it's because they want to make me apologize for what I said the first time. But it seems like you might be a bit different.
It's all right. No, it's fine. We're happy with it. Happy to have different views. And in fact, we have different views. You are a full-blown libertarian, man. I'm a classical liberal, I'd say, slightly conservative leaning, basically pretty liberal, straight down the middle. But you are quite a libertarian on immigration, and I'm interested in debating this with you. And I love having different views on, and I like views that are a little bit out there because it forces us to at least think, and go through the mental exercise. So while I don't agree with you, I want to get your idea. You believe in totally a libertarian idea of total open borders. Explain that to my small brain.
Let me come to that in just a moment, because yes, you're absolutely right. It seems really insane. If we just had open borders, everyone would come here. Our welfare system would collapse. Our infrastructure would be overwhelmed. We wouldn't be able to cope for all sorts of reasons. Just put a pin in that thought for just 1 second, and let's separate out 2 things. Everything that you've just said is true, and if life feels hard right now, it's because it is. In fact, in terms of disposable household income, we're back to levels that we saw before 2012. So we've actually lost an entire decade, approaching a decade and a half of actual growth and productivity and improvement in quality of life if you measure it on household disposable income terms, in inflation adjusted terms. And so that's very real. But people, I believe, are misguided in saying, well, we've simultaneously had high levels of immigration and our quality of life has dropped, therefore one must be causing the other. No, they are both caused by the same thing, which is a government which is completely mismanaging this country. Now, if you look at it in economic terms, it just comes down to productivity. All that matters in economic terms is actually how productive are you? The equation is very simple. If on average, every human being produces and creates more than they consume, then on average, the world becomes a richer, wealthier place. If on average we consume more than we create, then on average, the world becomes a poorer place.
Simple.
The number of people in the population is actually not a good way of predicting whether we're going to get wealthier or poorer. The number of people doesn't matter. What matters is, are those people at an individual level creating more than they consume?
Right.
And if they are, then in actual fact, what happens is the country gets richer. And the more people we have creating more than we consume, the faster we get richer. The problem with our immigration right now is that we've created really perverse incentives where people are free to come over and then not produce. They come over bringing, sickness because they might already be in their old age and they're coming over in some sort of a family reunification program, or they might be coming over with a very large family that just isn't going to work. They jump onto welfare. They are given an enormous amount of help and support, which in my opinion shouldn't exist. If you want to come here, that's fine. You're very welcome to do so, but you need to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to be productive. You need to produce more than you consume. Otherwise, you're just a parasite that is making the country poorer. Now, that's not inherent to an immigrant. An immigrant is not automatically a parasite. An immigrant who doesn't create more than they consume is a parasite in the same way that an Australian who doesn't create more than they consume is actually just a parasite.
Exactly.
Let me add one more thing before we discuss it.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just going to say there too, mate, it's also good to keep in mind the statistic that we revealed on the show a couple of weeks ago, that we've reached a point, according to the CIS study that was reported in the Financial Review, we've reached a point in Australia where 50% plus of people on an income in this country are reliant upon government for that income. Yep. So, I don't want to call everybody in that category parasite because a lot of people are contributing more value than they're taking from the economy that work for government, some of them. But there are parasites among that group. And unfortunately, and I'm not also including people who deserve welfare and need welfare genuinely, I'm talking about actual parasites, and we do have too many of them in this country. Another interesting point I want to make, that just because I think people might be a bit shocked about this open borders thing, but the United States had an open border policy right up until the early 20th century, where you could just rock up to Ellis Island and become an immigrant, enter the United States if you're willing to work and you're willing to contribute. The difference was they didn't have a welfare state.
Correct. And so this is the thing. You can either have a welfare state or you can have a generous immigration system. You cannot have both. Right. And what's happened at the moment is we have a completely unsustainable welfare state. If you want to know what our future looks like, look up the Cloward-Piven strategy, collapsing an economy through overly generous welfare, leading to an economic collapse, which then allows the ushering in of communism. Cloward-Piven strategy, you can look it up. That's where we are. We have an unsustainable social welfare net and socialist welfare system that cannot be sustained even for the Australians that we have. And then what we're doing is we're saying we're going to bring in huge numbers of people who then get access to not necessarily the same programs. People say, oh, it's a lie that these immigrants have access to welfare. Well, you're right. They don't have access to the same programs, but there are extremely generous programs that are available to them. And by the way, here's a little nugget for you. Did you know that we're paying about $30,000 to illegal immigrants or people who've overstayed their visas here in Australia who get caught? They get flown out to Manus Island, and then they are offered $30,000 basically to just accept being sent home and never being allowed back into Australia. So we're literally paying to get rid of people who are flown in here on a tourist visa, overstayed their visa. It's basically a money-making scam. They overstay their visa, they get themselves caught, they get processed and paid $30,000 to leave the country. So we are mismanaging immigration in all kinds of extremely insane ways. But let me touch on crime, because a lot of people say, well, these immigrants are bringing crime. A very small number of immigrants are bringing a very large amount of crime. The problem there isn't that there are criminals amongst the immigrants. The problem is the complete and abject failure of our justice system to actually deal with those criminals, because we've created a two-tiered justice system. The fact that someone is an immigrant, oh, they're a refugee, they've come from a war zone, suddenly we're releasing them back on the street when they've committed 200 violent crimes in the past. This is what we're seeing right now in Victoria. So what we actually need to see to make immigration work, we don't need to cut numbers. We need to cut the bad incentives, the perverse incentives. Remove all access to welfare. You want to come here, you're welcome to come here. You are going to work flat out for at least 10 years before you qualify for any kind of welfare. Secondly, if you commit a violent crime, you'll do whatever punishment we give you, and then we're sending you home. You're
Bye-bye.
gone.
Yep.
You are out of this country. We're not accepting people who want to bring violent crime. If we actually stood up for ourselves in terms of our welfare system, not handing out money to these people, and we actually stood up for ourselves regarding crime, then what would happen is the incentives would shift, and the only people that would come and the only people that would stay are the people that have every intention of genuinely building a new and better life for themselves through hard work and blood and sweat and tears.
And contributing to the economy and creating jobs, Topher, and creating jobs.
Correct.
For other people, which is what we all should be trying to do.
The problem is the perverse incentives. It's not actually the immigrants themselves. It's the incentives that lead to us getting the wrong immigrants and rewarding laziness.
Yeah. So the government keeps trying to tell everyone the reason for high housing costs, just to come back to that, has something to do with boomers using housing as an investment vehicle and there being a bubble because of negative gearing, and that might be a small contributing factor. But negative gearing does also stimulate investing in housing, right? So that means there is a supply benefit on the supply side. But the real problem that's actually staring us all in the face, as we discussed on the show a couple of weeks ago, is that the cost of building a new home in Australia is 30 to 48% government fees and charges and regulation related.
Correct.
The other cause, of course, is the demand on the demand side, which is, I would say, about the immigration. But Gen Y and Z are being done over by big government, and they're being told to blame the boomers. It's like telling us to blame supermarkets for inflation. You know, pull the other one, guys. It plays jingle bells. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
There's a lot of layers to what you said, and I'm not sure how much time we have left. But regarding boomers and their money, actually, them investing in property is what has created an enormous amount of the construction in the first place. There are a huge number of people living in rental properties that they could never have afforded to buy or to build in the first place. So why did they get built? Well, they got built by a boomer who saved up money, who wanted to make money on that money. So they built an investment property and got a renter in there. Privately owned rental programs are actually the biggest housing welfare program on the planet. Negative gearing and the idea that it's some special handout to homeowners is absurd. Every single business can deduct its costs. That's all it is a business deducting its costs, including the amortization of the capital value of the construction over time as it wears out and gets closer to needing a renovation or needing to be replaced. We have a situation as well, though, where the first time I heard about the housing affordability crisis was more than 20 years ago. It was during John Howard's time. Now, immigration was not to blame back then. So why was I hearing about it back then? Well, because it's created by onerous planning laws that create years worth of delays for anyone that wants to subdivide land, zoning that restricts how much land can be released, and then, as you just said, when it comes to actually subdividing and then constructing, 30 to nearly 50% of the cost is actually just directly the cost of government. So years worth of time and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm going to add a final thing onto that. We've removed the bottom rung from the housing ladder. When I was a kid, I grew up in Preston in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and there were all these blocks that had 3 or 4 or sometimes even 6 humble little single-story brick units on them. Entry-level housing. The concept of a worker's cottage was something that I was surrounded by. Where are those now? The smallest thing you can buy, unless you want to go high-rise apartment, which doesn't suit a lot of people for a lot of good reasons. If you want something that's actually built on dirt, find me something with less than 4 bedrooms right now. 4 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bathrooms, double car garage, and all the mod cons and bells and whistles. Now, the simple fact is that's not an entry-level house. But we've conned people into saying, well, if you can't afford that, it's because you're being screwed over in the housing market. Your parents could afford an entry-level house. Well, yeah, their entry-level house was 2, maybe 3 bedrooms with an outdoor toilet and no garage at all. It had a carport on it.
Yeah, very different.
We're not comparing apples to apples here.
No, absolutely not. All right, Topher, I want to keep talking to you. So if you don't mind just staying for a few more minutes, mate, if that's okay. We'll come back with Topher Field on the other side. If you want to see Topher's stuff, you can get onto his website at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com or just Google up on YouTube Topher Field and you'll find his channel. If you like The Other Side, one of the best ways you can support us is by signing up for the products of our sponsors. And one of our best sponsors is PIA VPN, the virtual private network that stops people spying on your internet activity. It'll keep you and your family truly safe from the prying eyes of big governments and corporations without slowing down your internet speeds. And you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. You can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and you'll get the discount. And you'll get more info on those special deals if you check it out. That's piavpn.com/otherside. That was a segment clip from our weekly Friday night news show, The Other Side, which you can watch in full by simply going to YouTube and searching up The Other Side Australia. Then you'll find our full shows playlist. You can also find all of our full shows and our segments on our own website, othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Help us build a whole new Aussie media by joining us over there and signing up for the exclusive side.